I'm sorry. My father, my mother, and I want an heir. I apologize. You understand, right? With these words, I was asked for a divorce by my husband, whom I deeply loved, all because we couldn't have a child. My name is Nancy. I married my husband Daniel when we were 25 years old. We originally met at our friend's house party, immediately hit it off, and our relationship developed. We got along well since then, and on our second anniversary, Daniel proposed to me. I grew up in Idaho and have been working in New York since graduating from college. Daniel's family lived in New York, but he didn't commute from home due to his work situation, so we had been living together before marriage. After Daniel proposed to me, I brought him back to my hometown in Idaho. My parents were thrilled with our marriage, especially my dad, who took a liking to Daniel and enjoyed drinking with him. Several weeks later, it was time for me to greet Daniel's parents, and I was very nervous. I had never thought I'd feel so anxious to meet my love's parents like this. This was the first time I experienced this event. Seeing me like this, Daniel reassured me. Don't be so nervous. My mom and dad are really nice. And he was right. I was able to relax and connect with my lovely in-laws when I met them. Daniel was an only child, so his parents had only raised him. They even said that they were happy because it felt like they finally had a daughter. They were truly warm and wonderful people. I felt very fortunate to marry Daniel and become part of this family. Our marriage proceeded smoothly, with both families meeting without any issues. We even managed to set the wedding date smoothly, and we were blessed by many people at our happy wedding ceremony. Truly, it was the happiest moment of my life. With our marriage registration, we rented a new apartment and started living together. The distance from our in-laws' house was not too far, but they told us, "You should enjoy your newlywed life together. If you need help, we'll be there." So, we started our new life as a couple. Our days were genuinely happy, and no matter how hard work was, knowing I would come home to my beloved husband made it bearable. On our days off, my husband and I would watch movies, go out to eat delicious food, and sometimes we would visit his parents' house and have a meal with them. But then, one day about a year into this blissful routine, a conversation arose while we were visiting my husband's family, and I was sipping tea they had served. "So, when will you two be having children?" The question came out of the blue and nearly made me spit out my tea. I did indeed want to have children someday, but right now I was simply enjoying my married life with my husband Daniel and hadn't given it much thought. Daniel didn't react at all when his parents asked, so I replied instead, "Well, children are indeed a blessing, but for now I'm perfectly happy with just Daniel," I answered instead. With that, my father-in-law's eyebrows shot up, and he put down the newspaper he had been reading and responded, "Nancy, you know you can't take your time on these things. You'll be at the age soon where it won't be easy to have children. You should have them while you're young and have the energy to raise them." I hadn't expected that kind of remark and was stunned. My mother-in-law chimed in right after my father-in-law. "That's right, Nancy. You can't just have them whenever you want, you know. And if your first child is a girl, you'll need to have a boy too. Anyhow, the sooner the better." She said it with a smile. I quickly glanced at Daniel, but he was playing with his phone and didn't respond at all. The vibe in my in-laws' house was as if it was a perfectly normal conversation, and I felt bewildered. Is it necessary to have a boy?" I asked hesitantly. My in-laws looked surprised and opened their eyes wide. "What are you talking about? Of course, it's necessary to have a boy for inheritance purposes. That's why we approved of your marriage so quickly." They said it as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. An heir? A boy is necessary? I couldn't understand at all. I had wanted a child with Daniel, but the gender didn't matter to me. All that mattered was that it would be our child, not just a simple preference for a boy. They wanted me to give birth to a boy. No, they wanted me to give birth to an heir. When I realized this, I felt sad. I thought they were so welcoming when we announced our marriage, but I never imagined it was because they wanted me to bear an heir. After that, my in-laws went on about how it would be better to have a child sooner and how a daughter would not be of much value, blabbing on with their self-righteous talk. Throughout the conversation, my husband didn't participate at all, but when he did open his mouth, all he said was, "We'll have a child eventually, just be patient." When we returned home, I revealed my true feelings to him. I do want a child, but I don't mind if it's not a boy. I love a girl just as much, and I hope your parents would too. However, my husband reacted as if it was a bother, saying, "Well, if you have a girl, you just have to try for a boy next. Then my parents will forgive you." What does he mean? Forgive you? Would it be wrong if I had a girl? The thought scared me. I began to worry that if I had a girl, my husband and in-laws might treat me coldly because of it. But for my in-laws and husband, who prioritized having a male heir, not having children was not an option. So we continued to try to conceive. Despite this, 3 years, even 5 years after our marriage, we remained childless. In the midst of this, my husband and I were called to my in-laws' house. I figured it was about the child issue. Ever since 2 years into our marriage, my in-laws' treatment towards me had grown harsher. Every time we met, they'd say things like, "Don't you have children yet? Aren't you leading a healthy lifestyle? Are you deliberately not getting pregnant?" They said these things without hesitation. Sure enough, when I went to my in-laws' house that day, they blamed me. "You've been married for 5 years and still no children? Have you gone for a checkup at the hospital?" they asked. Tired of being blamed, I decided to undergo fertility testing on my day off. I was surprised by the results that arrived after a while. There was absolutely no problem with me. To convey this, my husband and I went to my in-laws' house again to tell them that my test results showed no abnormalities. However, the reaction from my in-laws was not what I expected. "There's no way you're normal. Maybe the hospital is wrong?" "That's right. Daniel is healthy because he was born to us. It's definitely you, Nancy, who has the problem." Even after I had done the test they suggested and explained that there were no abnormalities, my in-laws refused to believe it. Rather, they behaved as if there was absolutely no way their son could be the problem, and instead placed all the blame on me. "Nancy, I don't know if you're falsifying the results because you don't want us to blame you, but if you can't have a child, shouldn't you get treated or something? What's the point of getting married otherwise?" said my mother-in-law. In that moment, I felt something crumble with a loud thud inside me. Oh, it's pointless to argue with these people, I thought. I should have realized this much sooner. But it was at this point that I finally came to understand this. Until now, I was honestly worried that I might be the reason we couldn't have a child. But after having medical tests and finding out that there's nothing wrong with me, I didn't want to blame myself anymore. I felt this way. As I was deep in thought, my father-in-law said to my husband Daniel, "Daniel, that's enough. It's time to have that talk." Then Daniel turned to me and said, "Sorry, my dad and mom want a grandchild. I'm sorry. You understand, right?" he said. At that moment, I understood that he was asking for a divorce. Normally, I'd be livid about being asked for a divorce for such a reason, but I had already given up on this family, so it didn't seem odd that they'd demand this. All right, let's get a lawyer. And so, we looked for a divorce lawyer and called the office as soon as we got home. I quickly found a new apartment and decided to move out as soon as it was available. At the time of property division, Daniel gave me a larger than average amount. I initially refused, but he seemed to feel somewhat guilty. He gave me a decent amount, so I gratefully accepted. After divorcing Daniel, I worked harder than before and, as a result, got promoted. I worked every day, and on my days off, I did what I liked. I was living a fairly fulfilling life. But there was something astonishing that happened during this time. About 2 months after the divorce, I found out through a mutual friend that Daniel had remarried. I thought, getting married again only 2 months after a divorce? Huh? But maybe they had been involved since we were married. Otherwise, it's hard to imagine a remarriage in such a short period of time. But I had received a decent amount of property, and I had no lingering feelings for my ex-husband, so honestly, I didn't care. I continued to focus on my work, and about 4 years after divorcing Daniel, I remarried a man who was 3 years younger than me. He knew that I was divorced, but he still wanted to be with me. For me, who had been focused solely on work for a while, he was a truly healing presence, someone who always made me feel calm when we were together. To my surprise, I became pregnant soon after we got married. We had a boy who, just like his father, had a gentle face. My husband, who loved children, was very cooperative in child rearing, which helped me recover quickly and return to work. 3 years later, I was blessed with another child with my husband, and this time it was a cute girl. My husband was even more doting on our daughter than he was on our son, to the point of astonishing both me and our son. Nevertheless, we were spending every day with ceaseless smiles, full of happiness. Our daughter started going to daycare, and I was back at work. One day, my husband suggested I should relax a bit, so I went out for drinks at a bar with my work colleagues after work. There, coincidentally, my ex-husband was also drinking with his colleagues, and started a conversation with me as I was about to leave. "You got remarried, didn't you?" He nodded awkwardly. "But we didn't have any kids. Turns out my new wife was infertile. She said she couldn't handle the pressure from my parents and left." He shared. "Huh? Is she?" When I responded to him dismissively, suddenly he grabbed my shoulder. "Hey, Nancy, why don't we start over? I'd rather be with you if I can't have kids. I think I'd be happier." He made such a self-centered proposition. I was pissed and responded, "It's too late now." I retorted and opened the pictures of my children on my phone, shoving it in front of my ex-husband. Seeing the pictures, my ex-husband was visibly shaken, stuttering. "Whose kids are these?" "They're mine. They're the children I had with my current husband. Don't compare your pathetic life, forever under your parents' thumb, with mine." I rebuked, shook off his hand, and left. I could hear my ex-husband calling out to me from behind, but of course I ignored him. The thought of my clueless ex-husband, who still didn't realize his own fault, made me sick. When I got home and told my husband about the incident, "It was the right decision to divorce him. Thank you for marrying me and giving birth to our adorable children." I felt truly grateful from the bottom of my heart for having a chance to start over with this man. A few days later, my ex-mother-in-law, who had probably heard the story from my ex-husband, contacted me on my phone. "I'm sorry for the past. I heard you have children now? A boy, isn't it? Come visit us sometime," she proposed. However, I had no intention whatsoever to let my children meet my ex-in-laws or my ex-husband. I knew that nothing good would come out of it. So I replied, "No thank you. Besides, I am divorced from your son. Please don't contact me anymore." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked their numbers. Since then, I've had no interaction with my ex-husband and his parents. If I could help it, I would never want to see or hear from them again. I regretted the fact that I had a divorce because I was married to my ex-husband, especially during the early stages of my divorce. But now, I feel grateful instead. Because I met and married my ex-husband and divorced him, I was able to meet my current husband and our adorable children. When I think about it, everything that happened had meaning in its own way. I just want to cherish the happiness in front of me. The life with my beloved husband and our adorable son and daughter. This everyday life. The fact that I am happy would surely be the best revenge against my ex-husband and his parents.